Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. I welcome you from a professional perspective and a personal perspective. The professional perspective is that I'm Bart Huibers, working at Geodan. I'm a senior consultant, mostly in government projects. And also, that's nice of working with Geodan, is there's always room to do some experiments. And recent experiments I'm doing is with my colleague Azarash. I'm researching the relationship between BIM, Building Information Modeling, and GIS. So that's the professional perspective. And the personal perspective is that I may be the only person in this room that actually lives here. Well, not in this fortress, but I live at shooting distance from this fortress in a village. Asper, you can go there if you like to. So welcome to my region as well. This afternoon we are going to have 5 presentations about geogaming, 5 presenters. And I had a bit of a shocking question for them. I asked them, what's your favorite game? And then they looked at me, well, I didn't expect that one. So I will ask them again while introducing them to you. And the first one I want to introduce is Professor Christoph Schlieder. Is that correct? From Bamberg University at Germany. And he said, well, I don't know what my favorite game is, but I am a geogamer. So I would like to hear much more about that. So the floor is yours. 15 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Bart, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Christoph Schlieder from the University of Bamberg. And I'm designing geogames since 2004. And my favorite game currently, it depends very much on what my daughters are playing, because I'm trying to outperform them. So currently it's Minecraft, yeah? But otherwise it's the geo games that we are designing. I came really by chance to designing geogames. I was, and I still am, involved in spatial database research for... Okay, I'm standing over there, but not getting... That's okay, yeah. Spatial database research and semantics research for people involved in built heritage preservation. And it started there. Somebody asked me whether I could design a game to guide people through a built heritage environment. And I said I could give it a try. I didn't know at that moment that it's similar to the question, could you build a house? And simply by knowing a lot of houses and having lived in many houses, you say, well, I could give a try building a house. So it's much more complicated than one thinks. And being a technological person, I could start with technology. But definitely geogames, location-based games, involve more than just technology. You have the players, which in the case of design processes may be stakeholders. And you have an environment which, not for all of our geogames, but for those that I'm going to talk about, are urban environments. So nevertheless, I thought that this is going to be an interdisciplinary audience, so I'm not really going to focus on the technological part, but nevertheless, I would be more than happy to answer your questions on technology. Nevertheless, I have one technology slide, a geogame engine abstracted in a way that it should be understandable to non-technologists. So that's the first lesson learned. I would like to share with you lessons learned. So why, from a computer science perspective, would you care about having an engine, a game engine? Well, it's simply a matter of coding. If you're coding one game and you're coding the next game, parts of the code is going to repeat. Think of things like a location provider. So you try to abstract this away, you get a geogame engine. And then you design games running on the engine, and then this is specific for location-based games, and this is different from video games. You need to localize these games to certain spatial environments. You play the game at Bamberg, at Redlands, at the Geofort. Actually, there's some, I've seen this on the website, there's some geogames played here at the Geofort. So let me briefly say something to the state of the art in location-based game research. So the games I'm going to concentrate on are location-based and they are played outdoors. Location-based means the location of the player affects the game somehow. If you're playing a board game, you can stand where you want. It's not going to affect the game. And the games we're looking at are all have locomotion as a central game element. So people are moving around in space, trying to reach certain spaces. This is an example. It's a travel guide for for people riding bicycles, where we integrated a geogame for bicycle riders. So all games connect their players socially. Geogames also connect them with the environment. And we had a couple of talks mentioning games today, very interesting. I would say on a scale, there are different scales, and we have seen that there are even different dimensions. There's a multiverse of games. I would say we are pretty much trying to get the people doing things in the real world by augmenting, of course, the real world with some information. So what is known from research on serious games, if you are using games in an educational setting, and this is converging evidence. I've just been last week at a serious game conference in Bournemouth in the UK. So it's really converging evidence, very nice survey paper presented by Becklock and Hendricks, that it increases learner motivation. So generally, this is why you want to introduce or use games to as a medium to transport content. This is why gamification is very important. It is a different matter, and there is mixed evidence regarding to learning outcome. It very much depends on how you design the game. So what every GeoGame does is it superimposes somehow a structure on the environment. Here you see a very simple example. It's geo-tic-tac-toe. At least to computer scientists, I would not have to need to explain what tic-tac-toe is. Yeah, you try to get, there's some places where you can place a cross or a circle. If you get 3 in a row, you win your game. So this is almost a simple thing you can think of. So what we were interested in is designing sets of rules. So it's not all about visualization, but about games that really work. That is, games that are balanced in a way that there is not a too easy winning strategy for either of the parties. I don't know, how many of you have heard about Google's GeoGame Ingress? Any Ingress players? No. Last year, yeah, they started. Well, they had a serious balancing problem in the beginning. It's all about this, developing simulation tools, geo-analytics to understand how these games are balanced, the game flow. So the research question, but for today, is could geogames, which are a medium, a social medium, they're a medium to connect to environment, they are also a medium for learning, could they also become a medium for the geodesign process? It's a question I would like to address, and I'm not an expert in geodesign. This is my problem. I attended this beginning of this year, the Geodesign conference in Redlands, and I read the book by Karl Steinitz, and I tried to connect somehow what we have done in geogames to geodesign, but I would be very happy to get feedback from real urban designers. The people we are working with are from geography and town planning. So what phases of the design process should geogames contribute to? And if I take the Steinitz model, there may be other models, but what I like about the model is that it states questions, and this is pretty much how computer scientists approach the problem, an analysis of requirements. So how does the landscape operate? Is the current landscape working well? And if I look at games that we have designed, like campus games that introduce students to a new campus. So there might be some designers claiming that the design does not need to be communicated, especially not a spatial design. It simply works. But if a student comes to a campus, it makes sense to show them where the library is, how things operate. Yeah? Questions like, what is the best place for activity X? Where am I going to eat? Where I'm going to work? Where I'm going to do other things? So games are a very good medium, in our experience, to address these questions. So what I would like to do is show you games that could help to explore a space, like a campus game, and games that help you to evaluate a space. Is the current landscape working well? So how do I feel about a place? Very subjective thing. So we had a game together with people working on geography education about teaching school children to learn to read a changing urban design. It is a classical transformation landscape in a German city called Augsburg, where you have transformation processes, and we compared learning with games to learning with a classical field trip. That's a classical situation you would have used before. And it turns out that motivation is much higher, and learning outcomes are also slightly better, we must say, than in the classical field trip situation. What is the matter with games? You may have seen this by following the GPS tracks, is that people are moving around. So it is much more self-determined in terms of which places you visit and in which order you're visiting the places, than a classical field trip where you take people from A to B to C to D. So let me give a very simple, let's say, game mechanics. Game mechanics are the rules of a game. So this is not something that, well, in a real game it would be a little bit more complicated. A very simple game is a game where you try to occupy a region by going there. So, of course, you might apply different sets of rules. The first on the point of interest is going to get the region. Or you need to solve a certain type of quest, a photo documentation task, something else, you're going to get the region. Now, how are you going to win the game? Different criteria could apply. Largest total area, a certain type of configuration. And interestingly, I found a very similar description, not of a game, but of geodesign principle in Carl Steinetz's book. He described principles for the design of faunal preserves. And he said, well, you're going to choose areas, and if it's bigger, it's better than smaller. If it's connected, better than disconnected. If it's disconnected, better near than far apart. So you could easily envisage this as a game. Player 1, player 2. One player tries to achieve this, the other tries to achieve this. So often, if you have a game, if you have design principles, and you have stakeholders trying to achieve different objectives, they are playing a kind of geogame. So you can do, and you should do, a spatial analysis. This is where geoinformation processing enters, and you should try to find whether the set of rules that you're using in the game is really balancing the game, or whether there are simple and maybe too easy winning strategies. Very briefly, on the second type of game, spatial evaluation games, you're playing a game. This is a student's project where we prototyped several of these games, where you try to answer questions like, do you feel secure at this place? This is a very subjective feeling, and it's something that players are very well in a position to answer. It's a kind of sensor network, but not for an objective measurement, but more a subjective assessment. And currently we are mapping places where people sit in a city. Yeah, there are very strange places where people sit, sometimes more. So let me conclude, because I think it's 2 minutes left. Conclude on the following. What would you need if you would like to set up a geogame, either to have people explore a certain spatial environment or to collect data from the environment? Well, typically the game is designed at 3 different levels. I've been talking about the set of rules, the game mechanics. This is what we call the ludic level. Then, of course, there is a level which gives you a story, which tells you why to solve these tasks. Yeah? And it's going to provide a geo-content. This is where you locate your game at a specific place. And then, and this is different from video games, you need really to stage the game. You need to make it happen. So you have to work with all the contingencies like weather conditions, traffic conditions, etc. Yeah? All this here. Typically, if you want to set this up, you need somebody who's going to provide this to you. A game that's already there, and technology that allows you to enter content into the game, to develop your own narrative and provide your own content for the game. And then, hopefully, you're going to stage it. So I'm going to come to conclusions. So for playful approaches to geodesign, I would say it's easier to focus on the early phases of the design process until how does the landscape work, giving this as a feedback to designers, than to support the creative process of the designer herself, himself. I think this is difficult. It is more about involving communities, about participatory design. So I think in this perspective, there are two important types of games: exploration games like a campus game, and evaluation games like games mapping, not building up noise maps or other things. And the important thing is that you need to check the game mechanics with some technology that provides you for simulating these games. Going into details of the simulation would become very technical, but I would be happy to answer questions, also questions as to why Google's ingress in the beginning was quite imbalanced. And it is very expensive to start a game with 100,000 players, which is not well balanced, where there are easy winning strategies. So it makes a lot of sense to spend some theoretical and simulation effort before starting the game. So if you want to set up a GeoGame, contact us. We will be happy to provide you with the technology. Thank you.
Exactly 15 minutes. Okay, thank you very much, Christoph.